Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are while you're listening to this webinar short. My name is Brenna Goggin, and I am the Mid-Atlantic Leadership Development Manager for River Network. And I would like to welcome you to Advocacy 101, Yes You Can Basics for Beginners. This webinar short will outline the differences between advocacy and lobbying, and it's the first in a three-part series discussing all aspects of advocacy. This webinar short is brought to you by River Network, who has filled a unique niche in the environmental community by focusing primarily on the 6,000 plus organizations that work for healthy rivers and clean water at the local and state levels, while striving to engage a much broader community in supporting healthy rivers and water resources. Learn more about our mission and our work at rivernetwork.org. One of the greatest myths surrounding 501c3s is that they cannot participate or are directly prohibited in participating in advocacy or lobbying activities. This webinar will deconstruct this idea while providing clear delineations on what these two words mean and what activities are associated with them. We'll start by reviewing the definitions of advocacy and lobbying, go over a brief overview of what activities are permitted by the IRS, how you can report your activities, and what activities 501c3s can and cannot do as far as advocacy and lobbying. While most organizations will use the words advocacy and lobbying interchangeably when promoting issue-based activism, they are in fact very different and regulated differently. In the case of advocacy, it is not defined, nor therefore is it regulated by the IRS. According to the dictionary, advocacy is generally defined as arguing in favor of a cause or an idea, and/or promoting mission through engagement with others. Notice the causes highlighted here. May is Bike Month. Let's celebrate the greatest invention ever. Encouraging folks to bike and therefore win prizes as an alternative to driving in their cars. Fight ocean litter. None of these issue propaganda pieces include any call to action, although one could argue it is implicit, as it relates to legislation, policy, or legislative action. Advocacy, in this case, is highlighting and raising awareness for an issue or a cause. It is much broader than legislative lobbying. Advocacy includes activities such as administrative advocacy, which is rulemaking and enforcement, research and analysis, documenting the reach and effects of an issue, media advocacy, educating the public through letters to the editor and op-eds, and judicial advocacy, litigation, and filing amicus briefs, just to name a few. Just a reminder, advocacy is not defined by the IRS, and therefore there is no limit to the amount of advocacy a person or an organization can do. Lobbying, on the other hand, is defined by the IRS and is defined as any attempt to influence a politician, public official, or a member of the public on a specific piece of legislation. As it is defined by the IRS, it is therefore regulated by the IRS, and as such has certain reporting requirements that come along with it. The Alliance for Justice, through their Bolder Advocacy program, www.bolderadvocacy.org, provides clear explanations on how nonprofits can report their lobbying activities. The first of which is the insubstantial test. The insubstantial test says no substantial part of a charity's activities can go towards carrying on propaganda or otherwise attempting to influence legislation. The problem with this particular reporting mechanism is that substantial is not further defined, leaving a lot of uncertainty for organizations. Therefore, several nonprofit organizations may choose to do the expenditure test or the 501H form, which outlines the percentage of funds that can go towards lobbying activities of your organization's entire budget. What's most important to remember about this is that whether you choose to do the insubstantial test or the 501H form, your organization should maintain a record of and report of expenditures, including the portions attributed to lobbying. That could include staff salaries and benefits, communication expenses, and overhead such as travel. If your organization is contemplating conducting lobbying activities or ramping up existing ones, you should investigate with a lawyer, whether it be through the Alliance for Justice or otherwise, on what reporting mechanism makes the most sense for your organization. As I mentioned, the IRS defines lobbying and therefore regulates it. The IRS defines lobbying by two different ways. You have direct lobbying, which is any attempt to influence new or existing legislation by communicating with a member of the legislative body or other government representative who has a say in the legislation. In Delaware, Senator Carper is the chair of the Environment Public Works Committee. Therefore, if I ask him to promote or oppose a piece of legislation, I am conducting direct lobbying. Grassroots lobbying is asking members of the public to influence new or existing legislation through communication with legislators or public officials. If River Network were to put out an action alert asking our members or members of the public to contact Senator Carper in opposition or in support of a piece of legislation, we would be doing grassroots lobbying. Many organizations participate in grassroots lobbying by creating online portals or sign-on letters for the public in order for them to contact legislators. As the IRS does define lobbying, they also spell out how and why and in what form nonprofits are forbidden to do certain types of activities. Strictly forbidden are 501c3s from engaging in any activity that's in support of or in direct opposition to any candidate for public office. While nonprofits can promote civic engagement such as voting, host forums for elected officials, they must always avoid endorsing or imposing any candidates for public office or using charitable assets for partisan campaign activities. Once again, I encourage you to look at Alliance for Justice or Boulder for Advocacy program, especially as the election season comes into full swing, to learn more about what nonprofits can and cannot do as it relates to elections. So just to recap what we've gone over today, nonprofits can and should lobby, and they can and should participate in advocacy activities. There are a myriad of resources out there, including with River Network and Alliance for Justice, that you can review to learn more about this. There are several activities that are associated with advocacy versus those that are associated with lobbying. Your organization should learn the difference and figure out which activities most represent moving their mission forward. Such two resources that I encourage you to look at are the upcoming webinars that River Network will be hosting, the second and third in this series. The first, on October 29th at 1 o'clock, Advocacy 102, will delve deeper into how you can involve your board of directors to both protect and promote your organization's work. Building upon the material that we covered in this webinar short, we will review specific topics, including board policies to adopt if you're exploring advocacy or lobbying activities, and how to educate and involve your board in existing advocacy efforts. The third webinar, taking place on November 12th, is Advocacy 103. This is taking the information that we have built upon in 101 and 102 to put together an issue-based campaign strategy. We'll walk step by step to prepare for and launch an effective issue campaign, learning tips and tricks outlining your campaign plan, how to identify key audiences, strategies for developing clear and memorable messages, and building an appropriate budget. Both of these webinars do require registration, and that link will be included at the end of this presentation. I would be remiss if I didn't mention River Network's National Annual Conference, where approximately 500 river and water champions representing nonprofits, academia, government, foundations, industry, and concerned communities come together for 3 days of education. This year, we will be in San Antonio, Texas, May 15th through the 18th, and you can find out more details by visiting rivernetwork.org/riverrally. Don't forget, current dues-paying members of River Network get 25% off River Rally registration. Thank you again so much for joining us for this webinar short. Feel free to register for Advocacy 102 and 103 at the link below, and have a great day.